Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm just going to run through some housekeeping while we're waiting for more attendees to join. So just to let you know, we're recording this session today. All attendees will receive a copy of that recording afterwards. If you have any questions, please make the most of the Q&A and we'll be going through them as we go along. Hi, Lisa in West Sussex. Nice to have you here. So I'm delighted to be joined by the Xbert team here today and also an ICB member, Georgina. We really appreciate them taking their time out to go through how AI can help you today. So I'm just going to hand straight over to the Xbert team. Thank you, Will.
Thanks, Jasmine. Morning, everyone. If everyone wants to pop in the chat and let us know where you're dialing in from, where you're coming from, and we've got speakers from all over the world, at both sides of the globe today. So it'd be good to know where everyone else is coming from too. I'm just going to share my screen quickly. There we go. Perfect. So obviously the topic of this webinar is using AI and workflows to increase your profits. So as I mentioned, we've got a couple of speakers from the world of bookkeeping on the call as well, and along with myself. So I'll introduce myself and I'll let Cass and Georgina introduce themselves. So I'm Will, I'm the GM for the UK Xbert here. So I've been working with accounting software or bookkeeping software for the last 7 or 8 years, mostly in a sales sense, but joined Xbert to launch the product over here at the start of the year. Cass, do you want to go next?
Thanks, Will, and thanks for having me along to this. So my name's Cassandra. I run a bookkeeping practice out of Brisbane, Australia. Sunny, it's not sunny at the moment, it's quite cold. I've got a team of 3 who work with me, and we work with clients right around Australia, and we also do work with clients overseas. I've got one in the UK that I do work with as well. I've been in practice for over 19 years now, and seen the transition through a number of different sort of applications that have been used for workflow and business management. We focus heavily on the Xero product and the Xero ecosystem. And about 18 months, I joined Xbert as their practice specialist, because I'd worked for so long in the bookkeeping environment, understood the drivers of work very, very deeply, and loved the product and saw the transformation that it actually had made in our practice, which made it very, very easy to also join the Xbert team. So I wear 2 hats here today. One is the Xbert, and the other is the bookkeeping expert and how we use it as well. So lovely to meet you all. Please ask lots of questions. We want to demonstrate as much and share as much information as we possibly can.
Yeah, I did forget to say that. So please jump in the Q&A, ask questions as we go along. Feel free to interrupt us or jump in and ask questions. The more interactive this session is, the better it will be for you guys. And Georgina, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Georgina Ford, and I'm an ICB member and have been in practice with them for 6 years now. My accountancy journey started many years ago, and in that time I've seen many changes. I was asked to write a review on Xbert, and it's got me really excited, and I'm already starting to put a lot of it into practice, and I think it'll really enable me to expand. So good.
Thanks, Georgina. Thanks very much. So yeah, I'm just going to set the scene a little bit about what we're going to talk about today, and I'll give you a bit of background about who Xbert are, or what we are and what we do, for anybody that hasn't heard of us or doesn't know anything about Xbert. But what we're going to talk about today, so really a few things that we're going to cover off today is improving your client's data quality with the AI that's built into Xbert, standardizing your processes with some of the workflow tools, utilizing AI to be really proactive within your practice, so not just reactive or at month end or when you're talking to clients, but actually being proactive when it comes to reaching out to clients and letting them know of any issues. Managing your work, so managing your workload, helping you to manage your team effectively, and manage how you're working, and then growing your practice. So on the growing your practice topic, it would be good to maybe just run a quick poll. Jasmine, I don't know whether you can run that poll if you're still there in the background, just to get a feel for how big or the types of practices that we've got on the call today, to know kind of how many employees you have and the size of your practice, so we can make this as relevant as possible. I haven't got the ability to run that poll, but if Jasmine's there, she may be able to do that for us. Hopefully that will pop up in a second. But whilst we're waiting for that, I'll give you a bit of the story about Xbert. So we're new to the UK. We're not a new product though. So we've been around since 2019 in Australia. As you would see, Cass is over in Australia. So we've got a team of around about 20 people over there, dev, sales, and customer success, in a couple of different offices. So we have a Sydney office and an office in Coffs Harbour. No one ever knows where Coffs Harbour is when I mention it. I do mention the big banana, but no one still knows what the big banana is either. But the boys will be very upset that nobody knows what that is. We do also have a presence in South Africa as well. And we have users across the world. So we have users in Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, in the US, and obviously now in the UK. I've put new-ish UK team. So we launched in the UK in March. And we were ICB accredited in April. So pretty quickly after we launched, we got ICB accredited. So we wanted to go with the ICB because we know that bookkeepers really, really love the tool, and Cass can speak to that. And I think the bookkeepers in Australia really will sing our praises and go through that in a lot in more detail, and we'll go through that in a second. But the poll has popped up now, so if you want to answer the poll in there, so what size of practice you have. And then what problem is Xbert solving? So what are we around to do? So I touched on it a second ago when I ran through what we're going to cover off today. But really the problems that we're solving are helping you to reducing review and rework. So making sure that the data quality and the bookkeeping work that you're doing is really, really effective and efficient, and there are no sort of errors or anomalies in that data. Reducing your compliance risks. So obviously, again, making sure that there's no errors. And helping practices to understand the size and complexity of their ledgers under management. So giving you a clear view of all of the clients that you're working with, and the types of issues or the types of things that might crop up, and the size of the number of transactions and the volume of work that you may have to do with each client. Improving team efficiencies and quality, so making sure that everybody is working to the same process, whether that be you as a sole practitioner or your team, and allow practices to be more proactive with advisory and not reactive. So setting up alerts to make sure that you're aware of anything that the client feels is really important within their data. So whether that be the profit margins dropped or they're getting close to the VAT threshold, setting up alerts so that you can reach out and be really proactive with your clients, and make sure that you're working effectively in collaboration with them. So there's a few things that we run. So we have 51 checks that run in the background that when we integrate into your Xero or QuickBooks ledger, we'll run those checks to look for things like duplicate bills, duplicate invoices, unreconciled transactions, etc. So it will connect into your Xero file and check for any of those issues, and QuickBooks as well, as I said. And Xbert stands for Xbert Business Alert, as you'll see at the top there. So if I'm talking about experts, that's talking about the AI tools that are checking that data for you. And then we have workflow. So there's really 3 or 4 key elements of Xbert. We have that AI audit and risk detection. So we have the AI checks that are running across your client's Xero data. We then have workflow automation. So we can put subtasks on those alerts, but we can also then do your standard operating procedures. So recurring workflows and like a practice management tool. And then we have analytics and reporting. So we can report on that data and give you a snapshot of the volume of transactions, the client's health checks, health scores, etc. And then we also have a client portal where you can let your clients into that to see those alerts or see those reports as well. So there's really 4 key areas, and we'll cover off most of those today. The 2 core ones that we'll focus on are the workflow and the AI audit and risk detection. So the first topic, or the first thing we're going to talk about is how do we maximize revenue and efficiencies and ultimately profitability within your practice using a tool like Xbert or using workflow. So we'll touch on workflows first. So Cass, I'll come to you first because I think you've been using Xbert for quite a while and kind of tweaking and changing your workflows as we spoke to before this. So how can workflow tools, or how have a workflow tool really helped you in your practice, and how can it help other practitioners?
Yeah, thanks, Will. So, we've been in practice for, as I said, over 19 years now. And over that time, gone from being a little sole trader with 1 or 2 clients to now having a team of 3 that works with me. And I've lost track of how many clients we have. But one of the challenges over the years was always around mapping out the work that we did in a standardized way for our clients. So what do we do for our clients, and how did we replicate that across our client base? when did we do that work? So the scheduling of the work, and rather than having to use calendars or sticky notes on the wall, or I've seen whiteboards mapped out with workflow. I looked at some of the other tools that were on the market, and I think the likes of Trello's and Asana's, Mondays, those sorts of tools are out there, but nothing ever really captured every element of it. Some did some parts of it really, really well, but was significantly deficient in other areas. And Xbert came along, and I have to admit, it took me a couple of years before the guys finally persuaded me to get into it. It was one of those, and it was a bit like the chicken and the egg, I think, because I needed to do it, but I didn't have the time to do it, but I needed to do it. So I eventually bit the bullet and carved out a Friday every week. That was going to be my day to work on the business rather than in the business, that analogy that we hear regularly. And jumped in and started having a look at the workflow side of what Xbert was delivering. So we'd been using the AI and the data quality stuff for a while with some of our clients. So the first thing I did is I had a chat to the CX team in Xbert and said, okay, I need to get this sorted out. Show me what it does. I can't believe that it's all of this sort of really cool stuff. I spent an hour on the phone with them and got off of it and completely transformed my workflow pretty much the same day, because what it was able to deliver for me in a single platform was clarity about how we did the work within our practice. So what were the steps that we did for everything that we delivered to our clients? And that for us could be the things that we're almost doing on a daily basis with them, or it could be things that we only ever do infrequently. And some of that could be once every 1 or 2 years that we don't, before we need to do it for whatever reason. It could be a really random ad hoc thing. And what I was finding I was doing, particularly with the stuff that we were doing less frequently, is every time the scenario came up where we needed to do that work, I'd have to basically sit there and reinvent the wheel because it was all in my brain, or I'd written it loosely on a scrap of paper somewhere, or, in a Word document that had got lost into our file management system. So I was finally able to start to get our step-by-step processes down, even in the most simple format. When I first started, it might have just been step 1, 2, 3, and 4. But over the time that I've been working with the product, I've actually gone through and actually expanded out the volume of information and the complexity of the information and the detail in the information around our processes. From that, I was able to easily then find out and map to it which clients did we do that particular work element for. And what frequency did we do that work on? So we do some work for our clients on a daily basis. Some we might do it on a 6-monthly basis, even an annual basis, and every iteration in between. So it was the first time I was actually able to see at a glance which clients I worked on and which time iteration or schedule we had those clients on for the work that we were delivering. The other thing that I was able to do very, very simply was assigning that work to a particular member of my team. And as a practice owner, one of the things that I lacked clarity on was what was the workload that all of my team members actually had. How were they programming their work in? What was their capacity to take on additional work? Where was it sitting? And that was really, really difficult for me to visualize from a top-down perspective. And we've actually been using Xero Practice Manager for probably about 10 or 12 years as well. And even though Practice Manager was great for our client records and our billing, it was absolutely terrible for workflow and work visualization. So suddenly I could see how we did it, see when we did it, and see who was doing it. But the next step around that was actually deploying that easily out to my staff so that they knew what they had to do and when they had to do it. So by triggering the schedules, that came into play very, very simply. My staff were then able to pick up the work on a daily basis that they needed to focus on. So they knew what their challenges and their priorities were on a day-to-day basis. They'd be able to look at that and follow the steps that they needed to follow to actually deliver that particular piece of work out to a client. And then they'd be able to record their time against it. So as we're building the schedules and assigning it to clients, I'm notionally saying, I actually think this piece of work for this client is going to take me 1 hour to do, or 2 hours, or however long it is. So we're mapping out our time expectation at the scheduling stage. But as we start to deliver that work, we're actually tracking our time against that initial time expectation. So suddenly I've got visibility around, I've said it was going to take me an hour, but it's taken 2 hours. And I can start to have a look and break down why the time variances might be in there. Now, because we use Practice Manager, we had all of that time that was being booked up to the task in Xbert feeding straight into Practice Manager, which then started to inform our billing and made our billing fairly simple, both either from a fixed fee perspective, so we do bill our clients fixed fee, monthly retainer, or we've still got a strong cohort of clients that we do hourly rate billing for variable reasons. So almost instantaneously. And I think the day that I did the session with Xbert and really got my head into it, within the space of about half an hour, I'd rattled off 10 particular processes that were things that we did consistently across our practice. So where that came and really resonated for me was about the same time as I was implementing Xbert. I was actually bringing a new team member on. And this particular team member I would have classified as a junior skilled team member. And the thing about bringing staff on is you sit there and you go, oh my God, I've got to train them now. Oh gosh, this is going to be frustrating. I've got to sit and train. What I was able to do with this staff member was actually say, okay, this is the task I want you to have a look at. Here's all of your tools, and here's the checklists and the how-tos and the, which reports you need to pull and all of that. I would love for you to step through this. I know it's a new system, but I'm trialing it, but be patient with me. You're my guinea pig. And within a day, she'd actually delivered on all of the work that was programmed for her. And I'd actually had minimal intervention from a training perspective. Yes, there were questions to be answered, but with previous hires that I'd had, I'd literally have to sit side by side with them for, a number of hours at a time across a number of days, bedding down process and workflow. And suddenly the friction around that disappeared almost instantaneously. So that for me was the catalyst of everything that we now do and live and breathe with in Xbert. Anything that we deliver to our clients is now mapped out in Xbert. We get a random task that comes in from a client for something. We had one today where the client wants us to remove a whole heap of leave items out of their Xero organization. We can easily push those into Xbert as well. And whilst we don't have a particular automation that sits around that says, well, this is how you deal with it because we've never dealt with it before, we can start to workflow that and bring that into a staff member's workflow and then do all of the tracking around it. So yeah, I'm a bit of an Xbert fangirl and just saw how it particularly did change our practice. So what am I seeing now, sort of 18, 19 months down the track from implementing Xbert? My staff are a lot more self-reliant. So they don't constantly need to ask me, what should I work on next? Not that they never ever really did that terribly, but sometimes there'd be this sort of task overwhelm. Where do I go now? And because we've got that now clearly mapped out, it's very easy for them to say, well, these are my priorities today. I've got to get those knocked over before I can start to work on the stuff that it doesn't matter if I don't get it done in 24 or 48 hours. I can see instantaneously what their time commitments are. So how heavily committed are they on a day, a week, a month, a quarter for client load, which makes me able to make decisions about new inquiries that come through. Can I bring this client on? Do I have the capacity to support this client? Which of my staff members is the best fit for this client? I find now that if one staff member has actually got through everything they need to do, we work very collaboratively as a team. So that staff member will start, and I love it when they jump in and actually do my work for me. So that's a bonus. They'll jump in and find some work that needs to be done for somebody else and knock that over as well. And they're able to do that in a really, really simple way, because even if it's a client they're not necessarily familiar with, the processes that we've got mapped out are basically rinse, wash and repeat across our whole client base. So we utilize client notes that are specific to sort of the client and their idiosyncrasies, but fundamentally everything we do for our clients is replicated across our client base. So we've seen the upshot it has been we're bringing more work on. We're doing our work far more efficiently, which is awesome when we've got fixed fee clients, because the thing you control there is time, not price. We've got capacity to bring new clients in very, very simply, and we've reduced a significant training liability, which means I can sit back and do wonderful things like this instead.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's great. That gives some really, really good insight to a lot of the practitioners on this call. Thanks very much for that, Cass. That's really, really interesting. And Georgina, obviously you're a little bit earlier in the journey when it comes to implementing Xbert and using Xbert. But what have you found that it's helped you to do, or is it whilst you've been implementing it, or during that sort of initial phase?
So for me, all my all my processes were in my head. I had everything mapped out on Google Calendar when a VAT quarter was ending for a client. I had all my tasks set up that way. And when I started getting into it, one of the big things that Cassandra said to me that really resonated was, don't try and do it all at once. Pick one thing. So as a client's VAT quarter came to an end, I thought, right, let me just put in work on the VAT side of it. And I've been doing that, and slowly I've been transferring everything over. And what I love about it is I work in dark mode. Everything's in dark mode, but I'm sat there on the workflow board and I can see in, an instant what work is urgent for me to do, what's not so urgent, and I think if you've got staff members, it's really good that you've got the photograph there, so you can just, the visual thing for it is just been,
who people are assigned, what's assigned to what people, right? It makes it really easy to be able to see that.
Yeah, definitely. But I'm just, I'm now building it up, putting in notes for certain clients that do things an odd way, and yeah, it's really starting that it's my go-to thing every morning now, and it's there, and I can just work my way, and I'm finding I'm actually working a lot better. I'm focusing more rather than flitting, because I was flitting between that and I was using toggle track to track my time, so I was just flitting from one thing to another all the time. Now I'm so much more focused, and I'm actually getting through an awful lot more. Yeah, definitely.
Perfect. I'll jump in.
Yeah.
I'll actually jump in and share my screen and show some of the workflow stuff. So Cass, feel free to add.
Yeah, I was going to say, one of the things that I've really liked about the product as well, Georgina, and even today, 18, 19 months on, I'm still developing and still iterating the workflows I've got in there, is that if I've got something in there as a templated workflow and I review it and I look at it and go, well, actually, I need to build some additional steps into that, I can simply add those steps into that particular template, and then it rolls out automatically to everything else that's already been deployed from that template. So I'm not having to sit and update everything manually. I update in one location and it rolls it out to every location, which is just gold. And Will's got a template demonstration up at the moment, and one of the things is being able to add an attachment to it. So I got halfway through a process a few weeks ago and realized I had a working paper or a working document that I wanted to include in it. So I added that attachment in here, and immediately that was available to me for any of the tasks that had already generated onto a workboard. So the simplicity of updating in bulk across your client base was just gold, because previously in products like Asana or Trello or Workflow Max, I'd have to go, oh, I've done it in one, now I've got to go and remember to update it across everything. That friction has actually disappeared.
And you actually have the option as well to choose whether you want to update everything, adjust new things or new and existing. So you can select how you want to adjust that. So just to kind of walk you through workflow, what a workflow template looks like in Xbert. So at the moment, I'm in my automations, I'm in my template, just having a look at the VAT one as an example here. The first thing that you can do is always put a a placeholder in there. So essentially it's going to tell me VAT for July or VAT for whatever month the start month is of that process. The description allows you to put in there, it's rich text editing, so you can add links, you can add bold, you can put bullet points, you can put whatever you like in there. So a description of what that job is. And then underneath you've got your subtasks, and Georgina mentioned about notes. So on every client you can have specific notes. So if there's a nuance for a certain client around how they want their VAT job done, you don't have to create a different template for them. You can have the same process with an additional note on there that just says, for this client you need to do this, this and this. So it adds it to that recurrence of that job for that specific client, and not for every client as well. You then put each template into a process over here on the left-hand side, so you can add it into VAT, etc. And I think, Cass, you mentioned it about putting that estimated time on there as well. So you can have
love
your
estimated time.
Yeah, you can have your default estimated time, but you can also, so when I come to save this and I go through to the schedules, you can also adjust that on a per client basis as well. So if you've got a client that you know is a real pain in the backside and is going to take an extra half an hour.
We never have those clients, Will. No.
I feel like that might be a slight white lie, but we'll gloss over that. But you can also have then different schedules. So I've got quarterly, I've got monthly, I've got weekly, and you can have whatever clients that you want assigned to those schedules. So when I come into this schedule, I can have it starting on whatever date that I want to start on. I can have it assigning to the relevant team member that's assigned to that client. So rather than an individual, it's actually assigned to, if you do have a team, it's assigned to the role within that team rather than a person. So if that person changes, it will automatically again update that for you. And you can see I've only got this assigned for these 3 clients, this schedule. But I've got, for Bob the Builder, I've actually added an extra hour's worth of estimated time for him as well. So I've added, it's now 2 hours for Bob the Builder. It's going to be quarterly. It's due 20 days after the start date. And I want to create it at least 1 month in the future, so that I can help me plan when it comes to capacity as well. And I save that, and I can roll that out across all of my clients or specific ones as well. And then when I come into my workboard, I filter my VAT processes, I can see all of my VAT jobs that are due for July, and I can work through those for whatever clients that I'm working on in that process there.
Well, I'm just picking up a comment that's been made in the chat from Lisa, and it's, as many of these softwares, I can see the value of this when you have personnel working with you, but I don't see the value of such software when you're a sole practitioner. Yep. I think this is a really interesting comment, and I think Georgina's got a perspective on this as well. But, I've had staff, as I said, I've got 3 staff, and I've had staff over the years. But what I'd wish retrospectively is that I'd had a tool like this when I was a sole practitioner. And I spent a number of years as a sole practitioner before choosing to bring staff on. And part of that was what I realized I was doing as a sole practitioner is it's so easy to just try and keep everything in your own mind. That's okay. I'll never forget that. And I realized that I'd have walls with, yellow sticky notes on it reminding me to do things for different people. And I used to have what was called I called them the 3 a.m. epiphanies, where you'd wake up with a start at 3 a.m., sitting bolt upright in bed going, crap, have I done this for that particular client? And, often it was, yes, I had done it, but there were chances that I actually hadn't done it. And what I was relying on as a sole practitioner was very simplistic systems to try and track work, which still put me at a point of frustration, even as a sole practitioner. And what I would love to have had was something where I could have had them documented down in a way that when I made the decision to bring staff on, I didn't need to reinvent that wheel, that my processes were better down. I just then needed to bring my staff into the systems that I was using, as opposed to having to build those systems at the same time as I'm trying to bring staff in and onboard them and get them familiar with clients. So for me, I do appreciate as a sole trader and a sole practitioner that, cost is often a challenge when you're looking at tools to support your practice. But I think about the sleepless nights, the mental strain, and the additional effort that it was required by not having this sort of stuff in place and bedded down in the first instance. But Georgina, I'd be keen, because you're a sole practitioner, on your perspective on that as well.
Yes, I was in exactly the same position as Lisa to start with, and I thought I don't need anything like that. I know what I'm doing. I know when I'm doing it.
Yep.
And then I started looking into it, and so I was exactly the same. Waking up, I've got I've still got a whiteboard. I've got my post-it notes. I'm scribbling down lists when I'll get a phone call from a client. Can you do this? And then I thought, well, okay, so when I want to go on holiday, I've got to work it around when the payroll dates are, when the VAT, you really are stuck. So if I wanted to bring somebody else in to help me out, how am I going to get that across to them? And it brought me back to, for some of those when you used to have these team building days, and they asked you to write down how to make a cup of tea. And then they get someone else to follow exactly what you've written down. And it was just like that. It's, to get it down, to get it across to somebody, so that if you need to step away or want to step away, that you can do that. And that is one of the things that really sort of made me think, well, okay, maybe I do need that. And as I said, I love the way it so visually presents itself. That is why it's made me choose to use Xbert.
I think to add on to that, we were sort of chatting a little bit prior to opening up the webinar this afternoon. Oh, sorry, it's this morning in the UK. Sorry, it's tonight, 7 o'clock at night here. But as a sole practitioner, sometimes you can actually be made absent from the business without notice. So you could have an accident, there could be a medical incident, and if that happens and nobody can step in a simple way, then your practice and your livelihood is potentially being put at risk. And one of the things that we talk about a lot in the community forums here in Australia, the bookkeeping forums, is contingency planning and succession planning. And we're actually starting to see a lot of buddy systems almost evolving between the sole practitioners, where they'll enter into arrangements with a trusted colleague to backfill in an emergency. And knowing that you've got those processes and protocols and also the client idiosyncrasies mapped out has actually made that quite simple for a lot of people. And I'm now starting to hear of a lot of the Aussie sole trader bookkeepers who are saying, well, actually, I can now take time off because I can bring somebody in to do the work while I'm away, and I don't have to think about it because I've actually got it nicely mapped out in a way that if I want to tap into it when I'm sitting overseas on the beach in wherever, I can, but I don't have to be responsible for the maintenance and the delivery of it on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's a consideration as well.
Yeah, and I think to touch on that as well, a real life use case of that is there's a firm that are using Xbert, and I'm sure they won't mind me mentioning their name, but Knutsford admin up near Manchester. I know that Helen, who runs that practice, was actually sat on the beach, or sat in because I had a Zoom call with her while she was sat on the beach setting up Xbert or looking through the work that her team members were doing in Xbert. And it's perfect because it gives you that really easily accessible tool to be able to jump in and just say, oh, what's happening with everything? I can spend 10-15 minutes just looking to make sure that everything is okay. And then I know, and it gives you that peace of mind, right? So you can relax when you're not around or you're away.
Well, look, even myself, I had a stint in hospital a couple of months back. And knowing that I had the team that was just able to jump in and do it without me driving the train on it was just gave me so much peace of mind, and meant I didn't have to worry about that at the same time. So
there was a question in the Q&A, Helen, but we'll touch on that in a second. So obviously we do workflows in Xbert, but we're going to come on to the other features and some of the other things that Xbert can do on top of some of the workflow side of things. So hopefully your question will get answered as we go through that. But please do let me know, Helen, if it doesn't, and we'll go through that for you in a bit more detail. So I want to kind of keep the session going, keep it moving, because we've got a few other things to talk about with Xbert, and obviously we were talking about AI as one of the topics on this session, and that's one of the core things that we have in Xbert to be able to help you to ensure that the quality of data that you have in your client Xero or QuickBooks files is up to scratch and working and effectively compliant, and also giving you the ability or to have the confidence of that in that data to be able to advise your clients on what they need to be doing going forward. So some of the questions that I wanted to ask you guys around that. So just some use cases. So other people on the call may have seen some other sort of data quality tools that are in the market in the UK. There's a couple that are floating around, and I know there's a few in Australia as well. But in the UK, we have a couple of tools that give you that data quality score or analyze the data. But can you give us some sort of practical examples of how you've utilized the AI audit side of things in Xbert, Cass, in your practice?
Yeah, sure. So we've got the majority of our client base connected to Xbert. So what that means is their Xero organization is connected to Xbert, and Xbert is actually reading the data in their Xero organization on a day-to-day basis. So we've got some clients that, you know, in a quarter for our what we call GST, which is the equivalent of your VAT review, we could be looking at over 3,000 lines of data to check before we finalize our lodgements and returns for that particular period. So what's happening now with Xbert Connected is Xbert is actually jumping in and doing a lot of the visual checks that we would be going through. And we're only doing them perhaps once a month or once a quarter, but Xbert is actually doing them on a daily basis and sometimes multiple times a day. So when an anomaly is detected, and that can be anything for us where we don't have documents attached to transactions, we need documents. It could be unreconciled transactions, as Will's highlighting, VAT activity without VAT numbers. Now we have GST without ABN numbers. So similar compliance functionality as you're looking at there. We're able to deal with and address that ASAP rather than potentially coming up at the end of the month or the quarter and then starting to deal with that, which means that we're likely to get a far better response out of our clients. In many instances, with some of the alerts that trigger or the experts that trigger, we can actually auto-resolve them as well. So many of them have actually just got a button on which says, let's jump in and hit OK. And every time we're doing that, it's actually increasing the integrity of the data in your client files. Is it 100% perfect? Absolutely not. But what it's doing for us is knocking out, 90% of the, oh my God, I've got to sit here and check all of these things. And oh, I missed that one because, it was one line in 3,000 lines worth of data. And, I'm a human. So we're using the AI side of it and the quality data as a day-to-day integrity check on our clients' files. Now, we work with clients, many of them that do their own bookkeeping as well. So in those situations, we've got some of these alerts triggering out to the clients directly, and things like, we need to have a tax invoice attached to a transaction in Xero if the value is above $82.50. So rather than us getting that alert and then contacting the client and saying, hey, can you do this? We've triggered that out to the client directly. They respond to it directly. Once they've resolved it in Xero, the Xbert resolves itself. So we still get the high quality results on data integrity, but there's less friction involved and less manual intervention required from us because it's happening in an automated way, and we can involve the clients in the solving of those problems as well. I'll let Will talk a little bit about the suite of experts that trigger, and that was the 51 that he was talking about before.
Yeah, I can touch on that briefly. Like, I'm not going to read all of them out or go through all of them, but there's some really important ones that come up. So obviously the VAT ones are pretty useful. Duplicate bills, duplicate invoices, draft fixed asset accounts, draft invoices. But the good thing with Xbert, all of those alerts then feed into what we call the data quality score, and they all have a risk value against them. And I think that risk value with Xbert, you can customize it completely. So you can come into each one of these experts and say, actually, this isn't really important for me and my clients. So I can put it to information, or I can put it to low. And what it's then going to do is not contribute towards this data quality score that we have in Xbert. So we have a lot of firms that work in Xbert that want to keep their data quality over a certain percentage. So they'll manage those risks, etc. But there's some really good things that you can do with that data quality score when it comes to pricing effectively.
Yes.
Yeah, Cass, I think you've spoken a lot about this with us.
Yeah, I actually get really excited about this, so sorry. We actually have started to use Xbert as a pre-pricing tool. So if we get a lead in from a new client who's saying, hey, could you come in and do our bookkeeping, and how much do you charge? That's the inevitable, can you do this work, but how much is it going to cost me conversation. We pivot that conversation into, well, we'd actually like to really understand more about your business before we do that. And one of the ways we do that is we connect your file up to our data quality tool. And what that does is it lets me see what's going on under the hood of your business, which puts us in a better position to actually understand the services that we can provide to support the work that you do. So we get agreement with that from our prospects at the very beginning to connect their Xero or their accounting data file up to Xbert. What that does for us is a number of different things. So firstly, I'm assured that we've all got the clients that tell you when you speak to them that their data is perfect, there are no errors, and they have very low volume of transactions. And then you connect something like Xbert up and you see that, you know, they've got 1,200 bank statement lines for a month and their data is actually all over the place. Nothing's been reconciled properly. There's a whole heap of sort of errors in information, and they really don't know what's going on at all. So it gives us that clarity around the, you know, the client's truth and the actual truth in terms of data. And we then leverage this. We actually charge our clients to do a pre-file review. So we contextualize it under the banner of a file quality audit. Let's have a look and see what's in here. And, you know, we connect the data file up and you can see straight away there's a data quality score. I have had clients come back with 0. And these are clients that have got thousands of transactions and their data quality has been 0. That's how bad their files have been. And we're able to go back to the client and prepare a report and say, hey guys, we have connected. Look, there's actually a little bit more going on here than you've expected. Here they all are broken down. What are the risks associated? What are the financial risks associated with it? Here in Australia, with some of these, if we're audited by the ATO, there's significant penalties for actually having these types of anomalies in our tax records. So we're able to sort of, in a really clear and concise way, map out for a client what the challenges are with their files are. And it means then that we can potentially price the work associated with remedying that separately from the pricing of our let's do your routine compliance, day-to-day bookkeeping, etc. The other thing that does, and Will's got I think an example of a report I generated only probably 3-4 months ago tops for a prospect that we use this methodology for. So they'd asked us to do the work. We pitched them the data quality, charged them nicely for the privilege of doing that. But then they also wanted a fixed fee price for ongoing services. So the report was able to identify everything that was actually anomalous in their file. But the other data that we got out there helped me start to understand where it sat from a pricing perspective. So we were able to, this is the report at the moment, and it's been, the client's details have all been removed. But, you know, you can see it looks a lot fancier than it actually is. The client absolutely loved it because we were able to very, very clearly clarify everything that was going on. We were able to then put a pricing strategy together, and because of the volume of transactions going through their organisation, there's a great report in Xbert that compares all of your clients' volume of data, which is awesome. We were able to see where they sat within our other clients. And my gut had said to me as I was pricing it that it was going to be at one level. But when I pulled it all into Xbert and did the comparatives and looked at all of the numbers, I realized that this was nearly a $4,000 a month client. You obviously, you know, we all have those challenges when we're pricing as, you know, are we pricing appropriately? When we went back and pitched this particular piece of work to the client, we were able to say, here's the report that supports everything we found, because they could see something tangible and detailed that reflected their business. When it came to pricing it, they didn't even think twice about it. They accepted the price without even arguing. And this is the pricing trend between organizations. So you can see where a new client would sit in with the rest of your clients in terms of volume. So this is where we strategically use Xbert as a pre-pricing tool, which means we're able to step into fixed fee pricing arrangements probably a lot sooner with many of our clients, rather than let's just try it for 3 or 6 months at an hourly rate and see how we go, because we don't know what we don't know. It gives us that under the hood view that we've never previously had. And I've been bitten badly by mispricing, fixed fee mispricing, and you get in the file and you go, oh my God, I had no idea that was there. Xbert is removing that risk profile associated with it. So we're loving these reports for pre-data quality checks. It's a revenue stream, but also sort of being more strategic with our pricing as well.
Perfect. And Georgina, obviously, as we said before, you're a few months into using Xbert. How have you kind of utilized the checks or the AI side of Xbert with some of your clients?
So I've been using it more with one main client, and when I started working with them 5 years ago, it was an absolute mess, and I spent a long time sorting it out. And then they had somebody else inputting the data, and again it turned into a mess. So now I'm at it, by using it and going through and just cleaning it up, I'm actually finding myself having to go in there and do less work for them. But I'm on a fixed price fee, and we've got an agreement, but it's, you know, it's helped me to streamline everything, clean up everything. And interestingly, I had somebody approach me about doing their books, and the one thing I was so looking forward to was putting it into the Xbert system, knowing after talking to them that there was going to be a whole heap of work just to get them to the place where you could do the regular work for them. Yeah, so I'm kind of looking forward to doing that, because I think it's going to be a minus score, to be honest.
Yeah, I think
you know,
the big thing there is making you more efficient, right? The margins that you guys have as bookkeepers are not huge. So especially when you're charging fixed fees, you need to make sure that you're being as efficient as you possibly can be, right? So having something like Xbert allows you to do that and make sure that the data that you're working with is quality data. There's been a few questions in the chat around sort of connecting a client's file into Xbert, pre-engagement, etc. And I think as long as you get written permission from that client, then they should be fine with that. And accessing the Zero file, etc. We have plenty of securities in place. We don't do anything with that data. That data doesn't go outside of Xbert anywhere. And as soon as you remove that client from Xbert, that data is completely deleted. We don't hold on to that or report on that or share that anywhere. The good thing with Xbert as well, and we'll touch on it in a second, with some of the additional AI features that we have in Xbert. So we have the 50 or so standard checks that run, but if you want to get into a bit more complex, you can actually build your own custom Xbert alerts as well. So we have the 50 standard ones, but then you can also go for your life and create whatever you want to create in here, essentially, and look into various different data areas. So we've got things like that I've created in here already. When a client's getting close to the VAT threshold, that was the one that we were asked as soon as we launched in the UK. That was, I think, the first event that we went to, the Festival of Accounting and Bookkeeping. About 10 people came up and said, "Can you do that? Can you tell us when they're getting close?" And that is one that we've put into our demo account. It's really easy to do. Things like no transactions in 20 days on a bank feed, or if the bank feed gets disconnected, alerting you when that bank feed connection isn't there anymore. But
transactions that have been unreconciled for more than 10 days.
Yeah, exactly that. So there's different areas that you can look into in the data. And the good thing with Xbert and the accessibility of Xbert is the fact that when you choose a data area that you want to build a custom alert in, if it cannot answer that question, it will not give you an answer. It's not like ChatGPT, where if you ask it a question, it doesn't know the answer, it'll still give you an answer even if it's incorrect. With Xbert, it's trained on a finite set of data. It checks itself, and if it cannot answer that question, it will either direct you to the right area that can answer that question, or just say to you, "Look, that's not something that I can answer in this data area or in this data set, so you may want to look somewhere else." A lot of pushback, or a few questions that we had initially when we launched the custom experts was, it's great, but I don't really know where to start. I don't know what to ask it. So we've developed that and built out some tips and suggestions over here on the right-hand side. So we've got some additional suggestions of what you can do, or what you can ask it, just to give you a good starting point as to what prompts you should use or what you should bring into Xbert. So if I click on that, it will populate my prompt box, but I can edit that prompt if I want to, or type my own in there as well. And essentially, it's then going to build that alert for me. So we're going through the process of building that. It's going to do that live. And this is it only works with cloud software at the moment, so we only work with Xero or QuickBooks. We are in the process of building some additional integrations, Georgina, in the UK. So Xero, QuickBooks currently, and MyOb, if anyone's using MyOb. I don't know, there's many people using MyOb here in the UK, but there may be a few. But yeah, it's only with Xero and QuickBooks currently. So yeah, once I've built that, it gives me an approach that it's going to use. So essentially it breaks down my prompt and gives me a step-by-step of what it's going to do. And then if I agree, I can click yes, and it'll then build that alert for me. What this is essentially doing is allowing you to build alerts on what's important for you and your clients in their data. So if you sat down with that client and they said they really want to track a specific sales tracking category, or they really want to know when their profit drops by 5% or anything like that, then you can set up an alert in Xbert. Is there anything that you've done in your account, Cass, that has been really
We've done a couple of different things, Will, and I pick up on your comment about people saying that they don't know what they want to build. And I was very much like that at the beginning. And then I started with something really, really simple. And then suddenly in just sort of routine day-to-day work, I went, oh, that'd be really cool to be able to build that. So you actually start to, it just sort of festers in the back of your mind, and then suddenly it'll pop out and go, I could do that in Xbert. So this is where some of the custom alerts. We have what we call payroll tax here in Australia, and each state has a different threshold for payroll tax. And basically payroll tax is the tax you pay for employing more people on top of the tax that's already withheld for their normal tax withholding. And so we built the configuration that says alert us when the payroll for a 12-month period is hitting $1.3 million. Because if we don't register on or before that actually happens, there's actually sort of significant penalties that can be applied to the businesses. One I built last week or the week before was current ratios. Let me know any clients whose current ratio is below 1.5, because they're clients that we might want to have a look at. They could be starting to hit cash flow challenges, liquidity challenges, those sorts of things. So, and interestingly, picking up on Will's comment about it sort of teaches itself, it actually went through about 6 iterations of how am I going to solve and answer this question before it finally settled on the one that was going to give it the best and most appropriate answer. So it was really quite fascinating sitting here watching it, sort of going through and going, I want this, I want this, I want it to do that, it's going to do this, and it's going to do that, going, oh, hang on a sec, I think I can refine that and make it better. And I think it was about 6 times it actually did that. So ability, or the beauty of custom experts is they are really just limited by your imagination. One for us is tell me if an accountant posts a manual journal to a client's file on the 30th of June. We have a 30th of June end of financial year, and we have lots of accountants that decide to post crazy journals to our clients' files, and we, often don't know about them until 6 months later. But I want to know about it when it happens. So that's been a favorite one. We've done a couple on GST. I should jump into my file and have a look. But there's just, it really is, oh, I need that piece of information on one or more clients. I wonder if I can build an Xbert around that. And more often than not, the answer is yes. And if the answer is no, I just throw it back to the team and say, we need this, and they'll figure out how to get it out there as well.
Nice. Yeah, and I think the good thing with custom experts is you can't break it, right? You're not gonna you ask it some questions. If it can't answer it, it will tell you that it can't answer it.
Yeah, no hallucinations. I think that's
No
what they call it in
hallucinations. Yeah.
ChatGPT,
No
the hallucination.
Nothing
Yeah.
like that. So go for your life, put some prompts in there, find out what it looks like. And you can access all of this in a 14-day free trial with Xbert as well. So you can have a play around with it and see what it looks like without any kind of risk essentially in there as well. So let me share my screen again. So essentially with the custom experts and the prompts, it's a data-driven approach to some insights. So if it's something that you really want to know before or as that happens, rather than waiting until a few days after it happens when you actually find it in the Xero file, then set up an expert for it or set up a prompt for it. Give some context to your prompts as well. So the more that you do, the more that you add in there, the better. So if the more parameters you want to put in there, the more tightly constrained that prompt can be, the better. It's not about building reports, or it's telling you when something happens. So it's saying, alert me when this happens. So not build me a report on this, this, and this. It's not going to be able to do that or push that for you. And what's the risk and opportunity that you want to uncover? So make sure that you're just really instructional with those prompts and everything.
I think an interesting outcome of this too, Will, is both not just from the custom experts that you can build, plus but it includes the ones that are there. If you've got your client file connected, but there's a particular service that you're not providing to your client, it doesn't necessarily mean that alert's not going to trigger. We had an example last year where we had a client connected to Xbert, but we didn't do their payroll processing or their employee onboarding. And one of my staff got an alert that superannuation, which I think is their pension equivalent over in the UK possibly, had been calculated at an incorrect rate, a 10% rather than an 11% rate. And, again, we get penalised fairly heavily if they're not paid at the correct rate and not paid on time. We got the alert for this, and we were able to ring the client and say, hey, this has been set up incorrectly. Now, if that hadn't been found, this could have cost the client upwards of, $5,000 to $10,000 by the time somebody had finally identified that it hadn't been calculated at the correct rate, hadn't been paid at the correct rate. There's interest and other penalties. So it's not just necessarily for the work that you are engaged to do with your client, it's for those other things that can value add to the relationship that you have with your client and really often set you apart from perhaps another advisor that's working with the client. So you've got your finger on the pulse, and that's incredibly valuable for your clients who are really invested in their numbers and the quality of the work that they undertake.
Yeah, perfect. We're coming up to time. Is there any final thoughts from you, Georgina, around the use of Xbert and how people can kind of implement it, or why they should implement it into their
I think some people will be thinking, wow, that's just like maybe really heavy, I don't need that. But break Xbert down into the different areas that it has. The workflow is a whole different thing to the data quality. And the client onboarding, again, although it uses checking the data, it's look at it as something different, as a way to potentially, bring in new clients. And I think that's the thing that I found with Xbert is take one bit, one section at a time with it. There's a lot there, but you don't need to do it all at once.
Yeah,
absolutely agree with that. The most valuable for me in my practice was definitely the workflows. Everything else that sat around it with the custom alerts, the expert alerts, the reporting was secondary. For me, the greatest value I've had out of it was actually getting the workflows in and working and mapped. That's provided me the biggest return on investment on so many dimensions in our practice.
nice. Thank you very much. It's been really beneficial. If there's any final questions, then feel free to get them into the Q&A. There's been a few around what products do we integrate with. So at the moment, as I mentioned, it's just Xero and QuickBooks, but we are working on free agent integration and started conversations with the guys at Sage as well. So with Sage, it will more than likely be Sage Cloud initially. I don't think we may look at Sage 50 depending on the demand for some of our clients if there is some demand there. I've popped the link to book a demo in the chat if you want to get on and book a demo, or you can scan the QR code on the screen as well. That will take you through to book a demo with myself or one of the team here. But thanks very much everyone for attending. Thanks Georgina. Thanks Cass. It's been great having you both.
Very welcome. Lovely to be involved. Thank you.
And yeah, if there's any other questions, then feel free to drop me an email directly. Happy to answer that as well. I've put my email in the chat function too. But we're pretty much bang on time. I like that. 1 minute to go. Cool. Thank you, everyone. Thanks to the ICB for having us on. And thanks, Cass. Thanks, Georgina. Thanks, all attendees.
My pleasure.
To hear from you. Thanks very much.